Hello, you guys. Welcome to a really cool, very special interview series that's actually going to be a three-part interview series with one of the most fascinating ladies that I know, Charmaine Childs. You want to say hi, Charmaine? Give us a little wave.
Hi.
Wonderful. Charmaine is somebody that I met and got to know very well at my yoga teacher training in Spain. I met her, we were both in the training program together, and when I discovered that Charmaine was a strong lady, she's a circus performer. She is an incredibly strong woman who can lift men off the floor, and she performs, and she's brilliant. She is not only strong in body, but she's incredibly strong in mind and spirit and has so much to offer just as far as deep personal awareness and self-development and developing your inner and outer strength. And that's really what we're talking about today as we, start a new year. 2018 is still fresh. And I thought it would be really cool to bring her on to talk about developing both physical and mental strength on and off the mat. So this is a slightly different interview type of series than we've had before. It's not solely dedicated to pelvic health and fitness, although of course it's always gonna, we can tie it in certainly to any type of core pelvic health issues that you may be having. But I think generally just sit back, and I hope you'll watch all three parts of this interview series and just see how it could apply to your life, as far as we all need more physical and mental strength. And it's true, you can develop it on the mat and bring it out into the real world. So let me briefly read a quick little bio about Charmaine, and I'll have her fill in the blanks afterwards. So Charmaine is a circus strong lady. She has made a career out of lifting men into the air and making people laugh. This playful mix of strength, grace, and comedy in her solo show and duo group acrobatic shows has delighted audiences at festivals, events, and in theaters through 23 countries over the past 15 years. As well as performing, she shares her exploration of developing physical and mental strength in workshops and as a speaker for events. So we are going to kick off this interview series talking about the power of habit. Charmaine, please tell us a little bit more about how you got into what you do before you talk to us about habit and dive right into the topic.
Started out my adult life as a not very athletic acting student, and I was studying theatre at university and being very regularly told by my teachers that I didn't have the right look to really get much acting work, that they didn't think that it was really going to work out for me, that I was really charismatic on stage, but that they didn't really believe me. Like I was not actually a very good actor. That's the problem. I was not very good at pretending. But then while I was there, I discovered circus, and a place where the things that make you not fit the normal mold are the things that make you unique and thus special in the world of the circus, where your uniqueness is your selling point. And my special thing was strength. I became an acrobatic bass, lifting people. And then after working as a bass and a clown in shows for years, then I decided to make a solo show, and I thought about what I could do. And I hadn't framed my work as being a strong lady before. I was really aware of my strength, but I hadn't ever kind of put it like that. And then I wanted to make a solo show, and figured that I couldn't juggle, I couldn't walk a tight wire. All I could do was lift people. So I decided to be a strong lady and lift people at the audience. And so since then I've kept making partner acrobatic shows, and I've kept touring as a solo strong lady, and that pretty much brings us to now.
Wow, I love it. And I love in your act, you wear this beautiful dress and you have this very feminine flower in your hair, and you just look so, feminine and kind of unassuming. And then you're lifting men out of the audience. It's so interesting and just a unique, cool thing. So tell us a little bit more about your work that you do in the self-development world, and what we're talking about today. You wanted to speak about the power of habit first, and then we were also going to talk about the power of ease and the power of play in developing physical and mental strength on and off the mat. So knowing that most of the people watching are probably either, mostly women, and they're mostly women who are working on some kind of core fitness issue. They're maybe having some core weakness. They maybe just want to feel confident in their bathing suit, but then again, they may also have some actual impairments related to pelvic floor or core fitness. There are probably women who want to be regular with their fitness routine, but maybe life gets in the way sometimes. I think that that's what we're starting with today. So what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, I need to say I'm a seeker of understanding about how the body and the mind work together and how we are as whole people. So I am not a neuroscientist. I am not any kind of medical professional. I just seek a lot of understanding. And the only reason I'm the one talking about this, not one of those, is that I have a passion for being able to take all these different bits of information from different schools of thought, be it yoga philosophy or neuroscience or meditation philosophy, and bring them together and kind of try and make it applicable to day-to-day life. So if there's anyone watching who is more of an expert in these things than me, I'm really sorry. But
you are humble. You're humble, Charmaine. But truly, I'm going to tell you guys, I've heard Charmaine speak at length about some topics that we're probably not even going to get into today. And she's brilliant, and she's done her research and her reading. So she may not have a PhD in neuroscience behind her title, but she knows what she's talking about. So continue, please.
And I also, when you're researching this stuff, if you're not a professional, just make sure it's always got, it always tells you what experiments it takes the findings from, that it's from peer-reviewed things. Yeah. And if you like, I can give you a list of books that I've got this stuff from that you can put in the notes maybe.
That would be great. Let's do that. Yeah.
Great. So habit is profoundly important, much more than I had realized when I first started researching this. And in the yoga philosophy world, they talk about it as samskara, and which is like these imprints on the body and the mind. And they are literally imprinted into our mind. The things that we do over and over again, our habits, are not just quirks, not just things that we've picked up. They've, through repetition of the same actions over and over again since we were small, we've created these neural pathways in our brains that are like, I like to think of it like a chain. Every time you run this chain, which is, I won't go into it too deeply, but you have neurons, and then there are these little bits in the brain, and then each neuron, any action or reaction or emotion, is a series of neurons firing together to make a little chain that then becomes, I get angry every time someone leaves dirty dishes on the counter, or becomes, when I do a handstand, I always remember to externally rotate and push through. These are just a chain of neurons firing together. Between these neurons are synapses, and it's this electrical impulse has to pass from one neuron to another through the synapses. And the more times we repeat something, the closer these neurons actually become to each other. The synapses actually connect them more, so that it becomes the path of least resistance for this energy in our brains. And our brains are really efficient, and they will always try and choose the path of least resistance. So these habits that we have, whether it is I train every day or I always get angry in traffic, these habits are just pathways we've walked a million times. That's the only reason they're there. And they're not permanent parts of us. They're totally changeable. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit about some ways that you can use your time on the mat to retrain habits more than just the habit of how you externally rotate your shoulder, but you can bring it into habits that are going to have lasting impact through every part of your day.
I love that. I love that. The what I always remember learning is when they fire together, they wire together. So you're creating these deeply grooved, rutted pathways in your neurons, in your physical body, but that's spilling over into all areas of life is what you're saying.
It totally is.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Okay, this is great. Continue.
I brought the chain up, I just remembered.
Yeah.
As when we want to strengthen a pathway, it's through repetition that we do it. Or there are two ways. Repetition is the way that most easily accesses our prefrontal cortex, our logical thinking brain that has our values and our vision for our life embedded in it. The other way that we can speedily strengthen these is through a burst of neurochemicals, either happy ones because we're moving towards something we want, or even that the stress hormone cortisol can be what deepens it as well. So when a pathway is fired alongside strong emotion, good or bad, it's like it paves that. It makes it extra strong. It coats it in something. It's like, so the combination of like just boring repetition will get you there. It'll just take longer. But repetition with emotion gets you there a lot faster. So
that is so great, because I want to interrupt just briefly. This I'm very much into, and I've sort of leaked this a little bit to my YouTube audience over time, but I'm very into visualization and the idea of manifestation. And so that's one reason they say that when you want to visualize some type of outcome, when you hook emotion to that visualization, it's much more powerful to manifest certain desires. Is that
and visualization, they've done things where they've wired people's heads up, and when you imagine something or you watch it, it fires the neurons in the same way as if you actually experience the thing, whether it's doing it or having it or whatever. But in your mind, when you visualize something in a feeling way, it's the same as if you are experiencing it.
Yeah.
So if you want to get a few extra reps in, but you can't go and do that thing to build that habit, just visualizing it actually gets the repetitions going and builds the habit. So, which is great. And then there's another thing, because of this power of the emotions to help pave the pathways, often when we catch ourselves partway through doing the habit that we've decided we're replacing with something else, or we catch ourselves not doing the new habit, we often get a big burst of emotion, of frustration, of disappointment, of moving away from. And that will actually pave the pathway that we don't want even stronger.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And we're just then running that pathway, even if we don't continue the action, because we imagine continuing action and with all that emotion, we're still just strengthening that pathway. So I have this idea of being a strong lady, and one of the tricks that I do in shows to break a metal chain. And to me, it made the leap where I'm like, okay, when I am trying to establish a new healthy habit or finish an old unhealthy habit, and the easiest way to finish a habit is to have something in place that you're replacing it with, by the way. But when I catch myself partway through where I don't want to go, I try to totally disengage from that pathway. I stop and I break that chain. I'm not carrying on mentally down that pathway again. I break the chain. I don't fixate on it. I throw the chain away. And then it's like, I imagine in terms of a strong lady act, I would break the chain, throw it away. I would do a big muscle pose and get the applause from the audience. So I do the same thing mentally. I break the chain. I throw it away. I pose and hear the applause. I congratulate myself for stopping. And then with that good emotion of having the pride, which I think pride gives you serotonin, I think. So you get a big burst of, I think it's serotonin or dopamine, I can't remember. You get this big burst of a good neurochemical in the pride of having stopped yourself and congratulated yourself, hit the internal applause, and then use that emotion to drive down the new pathway that you want.
This is so great. This is so great. So what I was just thinking to myself, Charmaine, is could we apply this to a regular person, a woman who, okay, so let's say scenario is she had a New Year's resolution to create some new healthy habit to work out every day, say, and she hasn't succeeded. So in this case,
Yeah.
rather than beat herself up on that, because that's just going to deepen the rut of that bad neural pathway that we don't want. So instead, she's going to visualize breaking the chain, throwing it away, hearing the applies, and just moving on. Yeah.
Yes. Even if you can't, like, say you planned that you were going to have half an hour of core training before you start your day every day, and you're already in the car on the way to work. You can't now break the chain and then do the exercise. You're on the way to work. So break the chain, throw it down, hear the applause of going like, that thing that I didn't want to happen where my morning gets away from me, it happened. Then just visualize how you planned your morning to go, how you want tomorrow morning to go. Like, visualize how you're going to fit that in, how you're going to feel, how you're going to treat yourself. And then, even though you didn't have time to just do it right then, I mean, if you have time to realize you didn't do the work and then stop, break the chain, and then do the work, that's even better. Yeah. But if you can't in that moment do the thing that you wish you'd done instead, visualize it, feel it, believe it, and then you've run that same pathway.
I love it. So you're creating a habit. Even when you're not actually physically doing it, you're creating that neural pathway, which creates the habit. Yeah. That's brilliant. Do you have an example of doing this in your own life? Like a full-on?
I have two different ones that are both very, very recent. One is that during the summer tour, I spend a lot of hours on the road, like driving for 7-8 hours in a day. And I had developed a habit of getting really angry with cars that drove slow in the fast lane. I would arrive exhausted and a bit annoyed with people almost every time I arrived at the end of one of these long drives. And I decided that I was going to use one of the habits I wanted to develop was cultivating more compassion for strangers in my life. So I was like, great, every time I'm in the car, I'm going to use that as a chance to cultivate a habit of instinctively feeling compassionate and giving people generosity in my assumptions of their intentions, and so every time I got in the car for these long drives, the moment I would feel the spark of frustration, I would catch it, I would stop it, and I would actively cultivate love, feelings of love, and hoping that they would arrive where they're going safely, and hoping that they were laughing while they were driving so slow in the fast lane, And it was amazing the difference of how I arrived to the places I was headed to. I would arrive so much fresher and feeling the love, feeling full of love. It was a quite incredible transformation of travel days for me.
Yeah.
And then also at the moment I'm working quite a lot on my hand balancing. So the process of hand balancing is quite amazing because you keep coming up against frustration again and again, because it's one of those things you take 2 steps forward and then the next day for some reason you've taken 1 step back, and I decided that because with handstands, it's one of those things that you need to train pretty much every day. It needs to be a really strong habit if you want to progress. So I'm trying to develop the habit, but one of the things that was getting in the way was my frustration. And so every time I would find myself not wanting to do handstands because it had frustrated me yesterday, then I would use that chance. I would break the chain, be like, okay, I can't bring myself to do half an hour of handstand training today. Or if I'm just like kicking up and not holding one, and I go, okay, great. Well, I need to do something every day. So I'm just going to go against the wall and do 3 lots of 30 seconds. And then I did something. something.
Yeah.
And that way I could feel like I didn't the 3 lots of 30 seconds against the wall probably didn't progress my handstands at all, but it strengthened the habit of doing handstand training every day. So rather than beat myself up on not being able to motivate myself for a half an hour of being upside down, I was able to congratulate myself on setting up the habit. So it's kind of like until it becomes habitual. And now I've been working really consistently for 10 weeks on it now. And now it feels like a habit. Like now I feel like I instinctively want to train handstands every day. But at the beginning, I just made sure that rather than focus on the skill, I focused on the habit. And it didn't matter how fast I was progressing. What I was doing was establishing a habit of daily handstand training.
That's great. And you were giving yourself applause along the way rather than imagining the audience booing, rather than letting yourself boo at yourself in your own, oh, I only did 30 seconds today. That's great.
Yeah, it's really good. And there's also our habits of story that we have for ourselves around these things are often more unhealthy than what we think of as our unhealthy habits. So like you might think that your unhealthy habit is not training enough, or some kind of eating crazy, or whatever it is, or snapping at your partner. These habits aren't healthy, but often it's the story around it that makes it worse. And so we can also concentrate on our habits of story. And for me, with handstands, when I had the story of, I just don't have the right body for handstands, then when I hit the frustration wasn't just with the handstands. The frustration was the frustration with my entire self. It was like going, my body's not right, but we changed the story. And if I concentrated on changing my habitual story about handstands to being that for everybody, handstands is a journey that is difficult. Even when you can hold a one-arm handstand, you're still hitting frustration because you're trying to hold a one-arm handstand with your feet touching your head. Like there's always further to go. And so if I can't enjoy being where I am now, then I'm not going to enjoy it once I can hold a handstand for 2 minutes. It's like, so I changed the story to be like, this is what it's like for everybody. This is just what handstands is. This is the beauty of handstands, is it gives me a chance with no real consequences to practice dealing with frustration in a healthy way. And so once I changed that story, and basically any time we're on the mat, the physical habits we're practicing are important, and we've chosen them for whatever reason we have, whether it is dealing with our core health, whether it's dealing with a shoulder injury, whatever it is. We've got specific exercises to build better body habits, but we can also double up, multitask, and use the time to really consciously cultivate better mental habits as well. And then we build resilience in the same way that we build physical resilience by practicing good activation patterns in our muscles. We practice emotional resilience by giving ourselves a chance that when we're on the mat, when we feel like we get to meet that frustration, we can practice how we deal with that frustration. And then when we deal with it in the real world, where the consequences are greater than, I didn't keep my hips aligned when I lifted one leg.
Yeah.
Bigger frustrations that have actual consequences, we've practiced a good habit of how we can deal with frustration, where if we're on the mat and we can practice accepting things exactly as they are and looking for what the next step is forward from that, then in life, we might, when we hit a frustration with our partner, be able to just accept things exactly as they are and not be like, well, it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
And be able to say, okay, things are like this. How would we like things to be? Okay, how are we going to get from here to there?
Yeah. Yeah.
And once that kind of practice starts to become instinctive through repetition, then it's going to just be your automatic go-to rather than your go-to being a whole lot of emotion.
I love that. I feel like I could use that with parenting a lot. The idea of just, rather than digging in and with things that I'm frustrated with parenting issues and with my kid, you just break the chain and you just refocus and kind of pivot and go in a more positive direction. I can see how that would really could apply to all areas.
There's one other thing that is like just a really practical way
Yeah.
to do it. So one is to, when you have your exercises on the mat, to also, like, because you get really clear, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and then this. Also get clear about your mental exercises that you're practicing repetitions of on the mat. Know that what comes up for you and how you're going to deal with it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But also there is this, our senses take in squillions of bits of information, and our brains can't cope with all of it.
Yeah.
So we have this thing called the reticular activation system, I believe, the RAS, and it is what filters out whatever is probably not important, so that there's enough focus in what we're taking in that we can actually process it with our brains and understand it. So we see a lot more than we realize we see.
Yeah.
And which is why when people do like hypnosis and stuff, they can remember seeing something that they didn't remember, you know, because it all comes in. But this chooses what we see. And by developing good habits of story and good habits of how we focus our attention, we train this activation system, this reticular activation system, this filter.
Yeah.
It's mainly trained by where our attention is. Like what we put our attention on trains this of what we think is important. And so it wants to give us the right thing. It wants to give us whatever is most important information. So if we're consistently putting our attention on something that gives us frustration, it's going to keep an eye out for that thing because that thing's clearly really important. And it's also always going to try and prove what we already think. So whatever story we habitually tell, it's going to try and find proof for that because we want to be right. And so it's always, if you're constantly telling yourself you're not strong enough, it's going to find you proof in abundance that you're not strong enough.
You're not pretty enough. You're not toned enough. You're not, you're in pain all the time. Pain, of course, is a huge one that we could go into, but what you focus on expands that theory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of like for people who are attached to the theory, to the law of attraction things, that already makes sense to them. But if you need some science to back it up, that's what is happening.
Yeah.
Where your attention is going is filtering what you're seeing. And so like at one point, I, even as a professional strong lady, I had this story of not being strong enough. And I was like, man, if even someone who makes their living as a strong lady can feel not strong enough, what hope does anyone?
Yeah.
But I had this feeling of not being strong enough. And I kept finding proof that I wasn't. And then I realized I had that story, realized that there was no need for it. And it shifted. And suddenly I would spot opportunities that I hadn't spotted before. Like there were tricks that I was trying to learn that I just couldn't get. But once I'd had the story of, I'm strong enough at this, I just don't know the right technique yet, or I just don't know how to activate the right things in the right time, or whatever it was, then I started to notice when someone came into the training space who could give me that information. And because I had the story that I was strong enough, I was brave enough to ask them for that information. I was like, hey, there's this thing I'm trying. I can't figure it out. Why can't I do it? Can you watch me? And then they would tell me, and then I could just do it. You know, it's like they would give me the steps I needed between where I was to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't have that habitual story, then I wouldn't have trained my system to be able to even see that there was an opportunity there.
Yeah.
But, you know, and because visualization is also so real in our brains, if we want to change our internal beliefs, our focus of attention, our story, if we visualize things as we want them to be, it's not like we have to say something is green when it's red. But if we know that we want more green and less red, then if we focus on visualizing the green, we're training this thing to see the opportunities for it. we're also training our belief that it's possible.
Yeah.
And what beliefs we have directly impacts on what action we will take. And what action we take changes what results we get. And what results we get confirm our beliefs, and it makes a loop. So if we can prime our state, if we can choose what we believe by our focus of attention, by our story, then we create beliefs that drive us to action. It's really hard to get yourself to work out every day if you don't think it's going to help.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think that a pain-free body is in your realm of possibility, you're not going to do the physio exercises to become pain-free.
Yeah.
But if you believe that it's a possibility for you, then of course you'll do it. It'll be effortless to get out there and do it, because you'll be like, okay, the next step between me and pain-free me is today's half an hour on the mat.
Yeah. Or if you can't make that half an hour, you do your 10 minutes that you can do, or your 3 minutes that you can do, and you congratulate yourself for getting that done.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. This is amazing. I love this. I want to move into our next little chunk, which is about the power of ease. But before we move into that and actually wrap for today's interview, I want to see if there's one kind of sentence, if you could, I think actually you did really just sort of sum this up in a sentence, but maybe if there's one take home tip or anything that you may have missed or what have you.
So for me, the key thing about the power of habit is that we are not fixed. That growth is totally in our nature. Nothing stays the same, whether we want it to or we don't want it to. And if we let growth just happen, then some of it will be good and some of it will be really not good.
Yeah.
And if we just choose, if we can be gentle and honest with where we are right now and accept where we are right now, stop fighting with it, and be clear about where we want to get to and just do the steps to get there, then the change that happens will be the change that we want to happen. And that the easiest way to look at getting from here to there is not huge, gigantic undertakings.
Yeah.
It's tiny footsteps day by day. It's the habits. It's the things that we do every day that make the big, big changes, not the big things we do once in a while.
I love it. I love it. This was amazing. Thank you. I'm so excited for part 2. I can't even wait. So I'm going to sign off for now, and I'm going to invite everyone to please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and please check out Charmaine's information. It's in the video notes below this video when you're watching it on YouTube. So just check that out. You can connect with her there, and please come back for our next interview in this series where we're going to be talking about the power of ease when it comes to physical and mental strength on and off the mat. Thank you so much, Charmaine. We'll see you next time.